All right. We'd like to welcome you all to the Oklahoma Council for the Social Studies annual conference virtually. Today we have we have a session on better conversations with Lynne Porter in the Oklahoma National Memorial. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Lynne. Take it away.
All right, great. Thank you so much, Peter. I appreciate you giving me the time to speak today. And I am going to just share my screen here in a moment. And sometimes I get it right away and sometimes I don't. So let's see, let me share. All right, so we're going to be talking about Better Conversations today, and this is a program that we started last year, looking back, thinking forward, and something that we feel is certainly relevant today and in the climate that we're at. Better Conversations was started last year, again, to try to give back to the community since it was the 25th anniversary last year. And the memorial was built, shortly after the 1995 bombing, and there were 350 people that were involved in a memorial foundation and building the memorial museum. Well, those individuals, it was just months after the bombing occurred, and they were, had raw emotions, and there were obviously a lot of anger and hurt and a lot of different emotions. And so in coming together to build this memorial museum, people had to be willing to listen to different conversations and be willing to listen to other ideas and respectfully learn how to move forward. And they did. And so we wanted to show that people can get along, that with all differing perspectives. And again, that is so needed today in this climate. And what we're about in having these conversations, we had several sessions that we held last year, and we were really wanting this to be an in-person thing and having people come together, sit around the table. And unfortunately, COVID kind of, gave us a little turn in that. And so we had a lot of Zoom conversations, and it wasn't necessarily, we would have different topics that we talk about, and it's not necessarily just talking about or finding the resolution at the end, but learning to have those conversations and thinking more about the topics. And some people might have, become more active afterwards in certain topics, but our conversations were more like, hey, let's get together and talk about this and see if we can find some common ground. So in starting the conversation, we had these grounding virtues that we used, and these came from On Being, an organization in their Civil Conversations project. Some of you may be familiar with Krista Tippett, and she and her organization created these grounding virtues. And the first one was words that matter. And the words that we use shape how we understand ourselves, how we interpret the world, and how we treat others. And that's important. What we say matters. So, you should take the time to really think about what you say before you say it. And hospitality is next. And that is just being welcoming to everyone that comes into your classroom or in your home, and just have that welcoming environment where you're willing to listen to other ideas. Humility, and I think this is important. It's not about getting small and not being proud of the accomplishments that you've had, but also bringing others along with you to really create a positive difference. Patience, that can be a really tough one, especially if you're hearing something that is that you strongly disagree with. And so just taking that time for patience, and that kind of goes into generous listening, that it take the time to listen to really hear what people are saying. Sometimes I've been surprised in some of the conversations that we've had that I kind of see their perspective, and it's important to have that listening and be patient and wait for people to say what they want to say. Sometimes they just want to be heard, and the conflict is kind of diffused. Adventurous civility. So just going beyond basic civility, it's about creating new possibilities for living forward while being different and even continuing to hold profound disagreement. So it's okay. I mean, to have disagreements and differences, that's what makes this country great, that we can have that. But it's important to, kind of see like, hey, we want the same thing at the end. What can we do to work together to go toward that? What we recommend is when you're having your conversations is to have everyone sit in a circle so everyone can see one another. And our facilitators, that when we did our facilitations, we recommend that the facilitators, they are just a neutral party. And so they're kind of taking themselves out of it. So the eye contact and facilitation, that's important we trained our facilitators to either look down or, kind of not really look at the person talking. And that's kind of awkward at first because we're used to looking at people in their eyes. And it's important to sometimes, if you do that, then the other individuals just will look at you rather than the whole other group, the facilitators can glance up from time to time to make eye contact and direct the conversation, but it's important to kind of let those other individuals look at each other and engage them, since you're kind of a neutral party in the conversation. Reading the body language. So you have a lot of students or individuals that might be shy, and those individuals may talk less or not put anything out. So watch for their sign language. There's different body language that they can use, maybe putting their hand over their mouth, changing their posture, maybe moving forward. And so just kind of watch that. And then if they're being passive, then just, kind of maybe signaling like, hey, any other ideas? And signaling to that person as to try to get them to participate in some way, but certainly don't force them, but try to encourage them. There's also some people that take over the conversation, and so for those individuals, if they're kind of taking a lot of the time, you might just turn a little bit, and just like you see in this picture here, and say to someone else, hey, do you have another idea? And get them to look at that. Sometimes you get no one that talks. And so that can be a little awkward when you're asking a question, and then we've all been in those kind of conversations where nobody says anything, and you just kind of sit there looking at each other, waiting for somebody to speak up. Usually someone does, or you can ask a question, redirect the question, and hopefully eventually usually somebody speaks up. So sometimes you get crying, or people get highly emotional. A lot of the topics that you might bring up are difficult, and they may be dealing with this intimately in their own lives. So facilitators that are doing it are not really psychologists, unless you're having a counselor lead these sessions. So it's important, if someone shares something emotional and if they're crying, to just thank them for what they're sharing, and then asking the group if they have something else, any other ideas or thoughts on the subject. You want to get in that nurturing role and saying, oh gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. But it's important to go on, and then, because a lot of times other participants will ask follow-up questions, but try to get it where other participants share their own personal stories about that, and open that up so it doesn't single out that person. And if somebody is extremely angry, that can happen a lot. Sometimes you can, if there's a pause, asking if there's any other thoughts, but also if it continues to heighten, go back to the original question or topic that you're talking about and maybe define it better. If you're talking about specifically religion, then maybe you're saying, hey, what is the dictionary definition of religion? And kind of bring people back on something else where they can calm down a little bit. So those are some tips that we have. Now we have a facilitation course. We offered it in person last year or on Zoom, but we have an online course for facilitation on our website, and I'll give that in just a minute. So you get, and it goes through all of these topics more in depth. Also talks about how you set it up, or if there's places you want to meet, just different things about being a facilitator and tips for being a good facilitator. So that's on our website, and I'll show that in a minute. When we started these conversations, we have a deck of cards, and again, those are on our website, which is different topics. And how we started is we had the individuals choose from all this deck of cards, which topic they wanted to talk about, and then those were voted on. So there's different ways you can do it. Maybe you want to bring something up in your classroom on a specific topic that is a current event or something that's happening in school. You can talk about that, or you can use this deck of cards, and then, or you can have people write down what they're interested in talking about, turn that in anonymously, and then vote on that. So lots of ways to do that. We also start our conversations out and setting some ground rules. So you want to get some rules that are pertinent to your classroom, that it might be you're not, you can't be disrespectful to somebody, or you can only talk a certain amount of time, or different things. So whatever works best in your classroom. And sometimes the students can make up the rules together, what they think is important in the conversation. For some powerful questions, so you want to have open-ended questions, which is extremely important, that touch a deep meaning or thought-provoking, generates energy, invites creativity and new possibilities. So a lot of different factors go into the type of questions that you ask. Most of the time you'll get questions, and then you can kind of hear what's saying and then take it maybe another way that these new ideas are generating. So here's some ideas again to ask powerful questions. For ending the conversation, we usually give a 5 to 10 minute warning, just to kind of let people know, like, hey, this is just a heads up that we're almost about ready to end. So if anyone has any last minute ideas or opinions that we haven't touched upon, go ahead and bring those up now. And then wrap up all the opinions and ideas at the end. So state the question again that you had, the starting question, and then talk about what was all brought up in during the conversation, and then bringing up what maybe people can think about after they leave their conversation. So it looks like somebody's in the waiting room there. So just bring up those questions or things that they might want to do at the end. Maybe they want to talk about it at their home, or different things like that. So, hi, Destiny. All right. Oops. Seems like for some reason, my PowerPoint is not moving forward now. Okay, so we have these conversations going on right now, and hopefully you can join those. We have tonight, actually, from 7 to 8 p.m., we have What Have the 2020 Elections Taught Us. So Mike Turpin, some of you may have heard him on Flashpoint, past state attorney general, and then also AJ Griffin was the past Oklahoma state senator. So they will talk today again, and hopefully people will participate and share their opinions as well. Next Tuesday, we have lessons have we learned from 2020 and should carry forth in 2021. And then the last time, Tuesday in February, is Valerie Couch, and she is a lawyer. She is going to, we have this quote actually on the side of our parking building: "Law must be a living thing, guided by the precedents of history, yet flexible enough to meet the changing conditions without straying from the greatest historic principles of our heritage." That's by Alfred P. Murrah, who obviously the federal building was named after him. So we are going to have these conversations every Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m. They're going to be via Zoom at this time, and we will have those available. You can just sign up online, and I'll be giving you that information here. So we can, it's just betterconversations.me, and then there's my contact information if you have any questions about that. And Destiny, you got on a little bit late. So we started this Better Conversations program last year. We have a facilitation course that is free. It's online, so you can just get all of that information there. And so you have the different, and then we should in March, we're hoping to offer some facilitation courses with the individual that built those, and that you'll see online that he'll do in person. And we're hoping that these different tips of how to become a facilitator will help you in your personal life, your professional life, anywhere you go, because all of these skills are important. So that is, and I don't see Derek on the line yet. Derek Smithy is one of our, he is a survivor of the bombing, and he's going to come on and talk a little bit. And he's going to kind of hopefully get in a conversation about, you know, what lessons he's learned from 1995 and how maybe some of the lessons of, you know, that has helped him through these certain tough times that we're having in 2020, as well as going into 2021. So we're hoping that he'll get on, and then some other things. So then we'll have a conversation where he gets on with that. And Destiny, I was saying earlier that a lot of times we have these conversations and we aren't looking for a particular answer or a resolution at the end of it, but to make sure, you know, listen to the different perspectives, and hopefully, you know, if people are very interested in it, then they'll go on and be more active in changing whatever needs to be changed, and finding more civil ways to do that. Did you have any questions, Destiny? I know you kind of came on later.
No, this is excellent. So is this geared toward students or just the greater community, for civic groups, or?
All of the above. So
Okay.
we are,
Wonderful.
you know, we welcome people, and we would be happy to talk to any civic groups and, you know, or students about more of this program. There's been a lot of educators that have come to some of our facilitation training sessions. And so we're excited about that. And especially we're hoping to, you know, COVID kind of stopped a lot of things, that luckily we can still do it via Zoom and connect that way. So we are hopeful, but yes, now you're with Generation Citizen, correct? That's what I thought. Okay. And you've worked with us also, I think, on the marathon.
Absolutely. When I was still a teacher and I was coaching cross country, you
awesome.
Yeah, sponsored quite a few of my teams. So yes, I'm really appreciate the work of the memorial. So this is great.
So, and we're also we're hoping to have some, when schools come on field trips, and some schools surprisingly still are coming in person. We're hoping that maybe we can set times aside too to talk to them in the classroom afterwards they finish, and talk to them about some important topics, and kind of have help in that civil dialogue, and how to have those conversations. We also are going to offer virtual field trips. We're working to finish that. So that will be probably mid-February, and then through the spring and summer. And so we'll be offering virtual field trips for free. and there'll be about a 45-minute session. And that is, we'll take them through the museum and then have time for question answer. We're also going to hopefully do something about the memorial too. Sometimes that's more weather dependent, and offering that virtually, and hopefully that'll be up. So I'm going to check on our other person that should be on, but he is not. So he's going to share his story, and then we're going to have some discussions afterwards. So Derek, I'm going to go ahead and turn it on over to you.
Okay. As Lynn said, I am a survivor of the Oklahoma City bombing. I can't believe it's been as long ago as it is, but you know, it's been since 1995, and that's unbelievable to me. But that day started out for me pretty much like any other day. I'm not one of those people blessed with foresight. I'm just a dude and show up to work that day. And the only thing that was a little unique is that day, that year, 1995, for the first time, I'd been assigned a new office that for the first time had a window. So I was pretty excited about having a window in my office. So I situated my desk right in front of that first floor window so I could look out the window all the time, and pretty quickly realized that it was not a good idea to be able to look out the window all the time because I was too easily distracted. So I turned my desk around so that my back was to the window when the bomb went off that morning. Now, as you might imagine, and you've seen pictures of the Murrah building, the blast itself blew the front of the Murrah building away, but pressure waves from that explosion, that, for lack of a better term, huge exhale and inhale of air, caused a lot of damage for miles around the site. And when the bomb went off, it blew the window that was behind me over me, knocked my forehead into the desk in front of me, and knocked me unconscious. Now, I don't know how long I was unconscious, but I was out long enough where some people, in fact, a guy across the hall came in and saw me laying there with blood all over me, you know, head wounds or bleeders. So he saw blood all over me and said, well, Derek is gone. Let's go find somebody we could help. Obviously, I wasn't gone. I was just unconscious. And when I woke up, I honestly did not think it was a bomb. I honestly thought that someone had randomly driven by my office and randomly shot a shotgun through the window and randomly hit me in the back of the head. But I pretty quickly realized this is a lot more than just a random shotgun blast. So I pulled myself together, went and checked out the rest of the division to make sure they were all okay. And there had been quite a few injuries, you know, people that had been thrown over the desks the wrong direction and taking glass to their body. But I was really, really happy when I found out that none of us had been killed. But I will share with you that I was wrong. We'd actually had 2 people killed that morning, Trudy Rigney and Bob Chipman. And I'll tell you a little bit more about Trudy and Bob here in just a second. But when something like that happens, you just want out of the building. I mean, it's a terrible situation and you want out. But we couldn't get out the door to our office. So we literally climbed out the very same windows that had just been blown in on us. And I will share that when I turned the corner and was able to see with my own eyes the Murrah building for the first time, it was a shock. And you know, this is like 8 or 9 minutes after the blast. Papers are in the air, things are on fire, people are running amok with bloody bandages, dust. It was a terrible scene of chaos. But I still, after 25 years, carry some guilt about that time, because I always thought I was the kind of person that when people needed help, I would put my own needs aside and do whatever it took to render aid and assistance to others. And instead of turning left and helping people, I turned right and went and sat down at a parking lot. Now, everybody tells me, you know, I'm being ridiculous. There's nothing I could have done. I took care of my own people. And I'm sure all of that is true. But sometimes what the head thinks and the heart thinks aren't the same. And my heart still hurts that I had my chance to step up and I did not do it. But nevertheless, I was sitting down at the parking lot. A buddy came by and said, Derek, you look terrible. Let's go to the emergency room at St. Anthony's down the street. So we did that. They took 4 or 5 big pieces of glass out of my head and said, "Your wounds aren't life-threatening, you need to leave. But you do have some glass still in your head. You need to see your primary care physician to have that glass removed." Ultimately did that. About a week later, they took a couple dozen pieces of glass out of my head, except for one. I have one that was deep enough. They said that one makes us nervous. And we just think it might be safer to just leave it in place and let the bone of your skull grow back around that piece of glass and encapsulate it. And you'll never know it was there. And sure enough, I really didn't. As I've gotten older and balder, I feel it as I wash my hair every day. But for the most part, my little one piece of glass doesn't affect me in any way. It took me about 6 months to get back to sort of normal for me. And there were probably 4 or 5 things that I thought were pretty significant in that healing process. One of them was I was busy. The very next day, we had a meeting at the Capitol to try to find some temporary offices to put people back to work serving the state of Oklahoma. So I really didn't have time to sit down and watch TV and feel sorry for myself. I had a job to do, and that turned out to be very helpful. I'm a little bit pudgy, but I found out exercise was an important part of my healing process. The support of my wife and my family and friends were an important part of that healing process. And my Christian faith and my church family were important to give me support and stability during those months. But even with that, it was about 6 months before I felt normal again. And it was probably 10 years before I was able to give this talk and felt comfortable enough to give the talk and communicate those emotions and the rawness of that day with others. Now, I mentioned Trudy and Bob. I want to real quick tell you about Trudy Rigney and Bob Chipman. Trudy Rigney and Bob Chipman were both killed that morning. Trudy Rigney was 20 years old, single mom. She had a little baby at home. She was a student at the University of Central Oklahoma, and she worked for us part-time at the Water Resources Board as a cartographer. So she helped us with maps and things like that. Well, of course, in 1995, maps were made with paper and colored pens and pencils, not computer screens and styluses. And her office was small, but it was built around that sort of thing. Her normal work day, since she worked for us part-time, her normal work days were Tuesdays and Thursdays. But on Tuesday, the day before the bombing, she was not able to come into work because she had a test at UCO. So like a good employee will do, is she came in bright and early Wednesday morning, went right to her office and got to work. Now, because we did everything with pen and paper, her office was lined with big map cases that were 8 feet tall, 4 feet wide, 2 feet deep. And she was sitting apparently at her drafting table when the bomb went off. And those pressure waves that blew all the glass in literally blew those map cases in on top of Trudy and crushed her to death. Now, it's especially hard for me because, as you recall, I walked through to make sure we were all okay. And I distinctly remember looking into Trudy's office and seeing that jumbled mess in there and thinking, I'm glad Trudy didn't work today since it was her day off, and moving right on by. It's especially painful because she wasn't reported missing until that evening, and her body wasn't recovered until the next day. So I don't know if she died instantly or whether she suffered for hours under the weight of those map cases. But nevertheless, we lost Trudy Rigney that morning. And she left a young son who's now a man living up in Northeast Oklahoma. The other person we lost was Bob Chipman. And Bob was in his late 50s, had just recently retired from the armed services. He had spent 30 plus years in the military. I find it ironic that here's a man that was in the military, saw combat overseas, so he literally shot at people and was shot at, retires, moves back home to sleepy little Oklahoma City, and gets killed by a bomb at his desk. Unlike a lot of us, though, Bob's office looked right down on ground zero where the Ryder truck was. And literally a piece of the Ryder truck was blown off, went through the window, caught Bob right below the right eye, and sheared off the right side of his head. Now, he wasn't going to survive long term with those kind of injuries, but he did survive several hours and died that afternoon at St. Anthony's Hospital, where I just left before. So he left a wife and some grown kids in Edmond. So we lost both Trudy and Bob that morning, April the 19th, 1995. And we do everything we can to try to make sure that Bob and Trudy's story is always remembered and always a part of the Waterboard family. So that's kind of my story. There's a lot more exciting and heroic stories than mine, but it's nevertheless part of my journey through life, and I'm happy that Lynn asked me to talk to you about it.
I have a few questions, but Destiny or Peter, do you have any questions that you want to ask Derek?
Thank you for sharing that story. I really appreciate just hearing the firsthand account of a person who was there. It's something that we study, in history and Oklahoma history. If you would say that there's one lesson that you took from that day that has gone with you through life, what would you say that it was?
Don't wait till you retire to give back. A lot of people understandably devote themselves to their career and to their family. And they say, when I retire, I'm going to work at the Cowboy Hall of Fame, or I'm going to do stuff at the church, or I'm going to volunteer. Well, don't wait to volunteer. Volunteer now, because it's been my experience that nothing fills you up as much as helping others. And so as a consequence of the bombing, I've become much more, I don't want to say civically active, but socially active with the Memorial Museum and 4-H and Boy Scouts and the aquarium and Jinx and river sport and church. And so I've become much more active, and I think it helps keep my spirit full.
And Derek, I just, this might be a tough question, and it's something that, after you say what you want, Destiny and Peter can share maybe their thoughts on this, but just thinking about, is there punishment in the process of healing? So just thinking about, what's happening today about the Capitol. Should you impeach him? Should you do that? But thinking about Timothy McVeigh, what did you think, and the perpetrators, did you feel that punishment fit the crime, or what, and did that help you heal once they were sentenced?
Interesting. Yeah, I know a lot of people, that punishment scenario, that whole crime and punishment and the trial and the execution was very important to them. And it was in part, I suppose, of their healing process or acceptance process or whatever it is. But I can only speak for me, and I can tell you from my perspective, I couldn't have cared less. I didn't want to see the trial. Maybe I did care less, because I did not want to see the trial. I did not want to be there. I did not want to see the execution. And I don't know if it's because it made me sad, and if I could avoid being sad, I would. So that made me sad. But the Timothy McVeigh story makes me sad, that he thought he didn't have a voice and he had to kill people to be heard and make a change in our country. And I reject that on its face. So his story makes me sad. The whole thing just, it makes me sad. And it was not a part of my healing process.
Did the events of last week and the attack on the Capitol, did that bring back any memories to you, that since, the 1995, Timothy McVeigh, he was against the government, and same with the Capitol, that was something against, the government. Did that bring back any memories, or 9/11, anything like that? Does that?
9/11 does a little bit, Lynn, and the Boston Marathon bombing does a little bit. But frankly, so does driving down to downtown Oklahoma City and seeing a sign that says Oklahoma Memorial Museum, turn right. That makes me remember the events of April the 19th. And I know that there's some people, and I really do understand it, that say, you know, we shouldn't have, whether it's statues or memorials or artwork or anything that could hurt people's feelings. But my instinct tells me there are certain events like the chairs at the Oklahoma City bombing that hurt people's feelings and make them feel bad, and that's a good thing. We want atrocious events to make us feel bad, because without that, we don't say never ever again. So I accept the value sometimes of uncomfortableness and discomfort, because I think it's healthy for us to grow as individuals and pizza people to sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable and be reminded of things that might make us not feel so good. That's just my weird opinion.
No, not weird at all. And I don't know if Destiny and Peter, if you have any things that you feel about, you know, what Derek had said.
Well, thank you for sharing your story and for answering these questions. And I just have to say, what you are telling us is so amazing. And I think about what I'm trying to impart to my students in Oklahoma City Public Schools. One of our units in 3rd grade is what is worth remembering. And we talk with 3rd graders about how do we remember the good stuff, but we also need to remember the bad stuff. And it just, what you said just hit me to the heart. I'm like, yes. And then I'm thinking, just how can I take this back? And do you, and support my children, because I think this is something that, that's something that they need to know. And we, a discussion that needs to have that. Yes, we remember the good things, but we also need to not forget, for these reasons, not to memorialize what McVeigh did, but to remember, the lives lost. And so thank you for that. Like that, that kind of fueled my fire.
Thank you for teaching our kids.
And just to let you know, Peter and Disney, that Derek, he does a tremendous amount of work for us. He volunteers his time to share his story. So he has been, like he was mentioning it early, this kind of helps him in his healing, sharing his story. So if you do want to have a first person talk at your school, Derek and we have survivors, family members, first responders, anyone that was impacted by their bombing. We have people that will share their story. That's something that you can just let me know if that's something that you're interested in, and I'd be happy to arrange that for you. Obviously, Derek actually comes to the museum if we have a small group, and then still during this time of COVID, or he's obviously done some Zoom things. So if that's something you're interested in, if there's a particular topic, a lot of times, Peter, for younger students, we'll have a first responder, and then they'll also put it into, okay, we can help you with this, this, and this. And so kind of doing the community helpers a lot, that they do in younger grades. So we match it to whatever age appropriate is. And I usually will let Derek know, hey, this is a high schooler, this is a, younger kid. So you, tailor it to that. But it's a great resource, and I think it's powerful to hear from somebody that lived through it. And I appreciate, and Derek, that you share that you understand that there's other people that wanted the death penalty and they needed to see that, and you're fine with that you're not arguing with their opinions, that's their thoughts. And and that's important, I think, in what we're trying to teach with the Better Conversations, that, you know, it's okay to disagree and not have that. We all have our different experiences, life experiences, and that helps build who we are. And it's important to know that people may not feel strongly about certain things that you may feel very strongly about. And it's important to remember that and allow others to grieve or in their own way, because certainly what helped you might not have helped somebody else after the bombing, and vice versa. So thanks for sharing those important points. We do have Better Conversations. I don't know. And Derek, maybe you want this too, for people, your church or family, friends, online and at betterconversations.me, or on our website at memorialmuseum.com. For Better Conversations, we have decks of cards that you can get different topics. I think there's like 30 different ones, and we continue to add them as current events come up. And those are some maybe starting conversations. And you know, it's difficult. I think even with my own family, we've adopted this Zoom call every Sunday night, and my family is kind of a surface talkers, and they don't really dive deep into any topics. And if it's controversial, they're kind of like, you know, skirt that and talk about something else. And I brought up something the other day, because I thought, okay, I'm going to get into these Better Conversations with my parents and my siblings, and we're going to have it. That lasted about 2 seconds. It was like, well, your dad got, you know, his tooth extracted the other day. And I was like, okay, we were talking about this. That was kind of it. But again, it's, you know, some people aren't as comfortable, but it's important to start those conversations somewhere, and wherever you can, family, friends, classroom. But we hope that, you know, you look online at the different resources that we offer. And if there is something else that you're think that the Memorial and Museum can support you with, we'd be happy to develop some different curriculum or lessons for you, and support you in any way that we can. Any last minute questions of me or of Derek? Okay, well, I thank you very much, and thank you, Peter, for all the work that you do, and also Destiny with the Generation Citizen is a great organization. So all the support you get for that and the Memorial Marathon, appreciate that. So with that, I will say goodbye. And again, if anyone wants to join us, Better Conversations tonight with Mike Turpin and AJ Griffin from 7 to 8 on Zoom, just sign up online on our website, memorialmuseum.com. Love to have you join in the debate on what the 2020 elections have taught us, and having that conversation with a Democrat and Republican and getting along. So thank you so much. And you guys have a very nice evening.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So
Thanks.
much. I appreciate
Bye.
it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.